This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Reality is only real if you believe it to be true. The looking glass can become skewed over time and distort the image that stands in front of your eyes. You believe what you see, but what you see has been altered. When a conscious decision is made to check your vision, the blur comes into focus and a new world opens up. With new eyes, your soul is rejuvenated, and the path in front of you becomes clear. In an instant, those dark shadows become beams of light. Our lives become transformed due to a moment of clarity. A simple adjustment in how we perceive the world is the moment when everything changes. We open our eyes as a newborn child looking towards all the potential possibilities. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's the stories that we like here and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome a relatively new friend, and that's Dr. J.C. Doornick, a.k.a. The Dragon, and we're going to get into why everybody calls you The Dragon, because that's how I was introduced to you the first time. But thank you so much for coming in.
It's an honor and privilege to be here, and it's always nice to hear somebody for the first time call you a friend, and I know you probably mean it.
I do. I don't use that F word very lightly, and tonight we're going to be talking about the suffering of transformations, because I really like how you sort of turned your life on its ear, but we're going to get into why that happened. Before we do, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police officers or podcasters, and that's why we do trust Toyota Hackensack. So go to toyotahackensack.com and let them find you a car. So JC, each week we take a question from our audience. This question comes from Seer Seeker, and it says, what is something that you added to your life that you always wanted, but when you got it, you found out that it just didn't make you happy?
You know, it's funny, because what I'm going to say is probably what everybody is after. And, it's like you don't know what you got until it's gone, but you also don't know what you got until you get it. And I would say the answer to that would be success. And the reason why I say that, and we were kind of alluding to that, the first dance that I had with success, and what I mean by that is by, making a nice amount of money that I always thought equated to success. It came at the expense of trading time for it. I was a workaholic. Some people are alcoholics. I was a workaholic. I was working 80, 90 hours a week to acquire that goal, that holy grail. So if I could take something back, it would be the time with my kids. That's one thing I could never have, is during that workaholic time.
And that's something they're not making any more of.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right.
So it's the funny thing is everybody wants to be successful, but very few people know what success is.
That's right. Nobody taught me what success was. I learned by watching people.
I heard this great definition of success. It's the exceeding of expectations. So if you're in a relationship and you start out that relationship on fire, you're giving her a dozen roses every week. Well, how are you going to maintain that? That's a bar you're setting for yourself that is just unattainable in the long term. But by definition, the definition of failure is falling below expectations. So I heard this quote. There was a movie with Bette Midler and James Caan called For the Boys. All right.
Okay.
And, it was kind of like a knockoff of a Lucy and Desi type of thing. They started out in the USO, and, they had this chemistry together, and they did a sitcom and stuff. And all these tragedies happened throughout their life. And at the end of their life, Bette Midler turns to James Caan and she goes, there's a cost to everything. There's a price for everything. This was the price that we paid in order to be successful, or their idea of what success is. She lost her son in Vietnam, and she lost her husband in World War II. And all these tragedies happened throughout their life, but she was ultra successful. And on paper, she looked great. So I like your answer a lot, because there's a cost to everything. There's nothing given for free.
Yeah.
So that movie, if you haven't seen that movie, watch that movie.
I'm a big James Caan fan.
So am I.
Is he still alive?
No, he passed, I want to say probably 2 or 3 years
it's
ago.
a shame.
Yeah, his son's still alive. Looks just like him.
Oh, wow.
So my answer to that is on the wavelength of yours. It's money. By the end of my police career, I was making a pretty good salary, and I was making 3 times plus what I started out as. But the funny thing is I didn't live all that differently, because you're working so hard to accumulate all this money, but all you're doing is accumulating responsibilities. You make more money, so you buy a house, you have some children, you have all these, and you acquire all these things and all these accumulations that end up owning you. So money, when they say money is the root of all evil, they're not far from the truth on that. You need money to live, and with money, it does take a lot of the pressure off. I will say that, but just enough. When you have more than you need, that's when stuff starts going wrong. That's when you start living above your means, because it could all end tomorrow, right?
Yeah. And I always like to say that money's not the root of all evil. It's the love of money. And if money was such a bad thing, they wouldn't ask for it in church. But you'll never have enough money. It's something I try to teach my kids. The moment you become this proverbial millionaire, like within a minute, you'll be pondering the idea of 2 million. But once again, I always wonder if I went back and talked to the guy that went after money like I did and put my kids second to work, I don't think he would be open to listening to this message, because he would have said, you guys don't know what you're talking about. So I also understand why I did that, and it also equated to some valuable lessons in life that have brought me to where I'm at.
We just had this discussion in one of our pre-production meetings today. It's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Anything above keeping the lights on is a slippery slope. It really is a slippery slope, because if you're doing, especially this better than anybody, if you're doing podcasting for the money, boy, are you going to be seriously disappointed. There is money involved in it. However, it's not what you think it is. It's a mission. So there's 3 reasons you start a podcast: mission, message, and money. If you're doing it for the money, God, good luck. But if you realign yourself with that mission and message, that's when the fulfillment comes in there. And that's something that's way more valuable to me than money.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Seer Seeker, thank you so much for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. And while you're at it, go see Gus at Cubita Cafe. That's 234 Franklin Avenue. Classically trained chef, probably some of the best food you're ever going to eat in your life. He cooks very healthy. He cooks to my dietary needs. And as Gus always says, he's not in the food business. He's in the people business. So go over and see Gus at Cubita Cafe, 234 Franklin Avenue, and tell him the Suffering Podcast sent you. So, JC, you traveled from Connecticut all this way to come down humbly and sit in this studio and have this discussion with me. We got a chance to talk on your show, Make Sense, not that long ago, and I really did enjoy, because there was a lot to unpack between us. There's more similarities to us.
It's a 2-hour episode.
Yeah, there's way more similarities between us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was a nice, comfortable conversation. You're an incredibly bright and brilliant man.
Thanks.
And it was a good time, because I usually don't like doing those Zoom things.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you're a friend, because I do the Zoom things for my friends. So there you go.
There you go. Validation once again.
So I know enough about you. We met at Creative Con in 2004 in February. I know enough about you from our mutual friend, Julie Loken. But I want you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
So it's interesting, because I'm one of these guys that, probably was looked at as somebody that had it made. I wrote another book that's coming out in the future called We Had It Made. But I grew up in Westchester. I mean, I spent the first couple of years of my life in France. My father is from France, and my dad was an Olympic skier. So I have an interesting life there.
That's right. Your name's Jean-Claude.
Jean-Claude, after Jean-Claude Keely. And my grandfather, I come from a very interesting family, which is how I learned later on I have the entertainment gene in me. My grandfather was pretty much the guy that invented cabaret, and his best friends were like Pablo Picasso and Charlie Chaplin.
Whoa. Hang on a second.
Yeah, we could get sidetracked with that. But I grew up in Rye, New York. I mean, it's Westchester. It's like, one of the wealthiest areas, and I went to Rye High School, where
isn't that where Howard Stern used to live?
I don't know. I don't think Howard Stern lived there. I think Howard Stern's from Long Island.
Oh, no. So the story, no. I'm going to tell you how Rye, New York. So somebody years ago, when Howard Stern was Howard Stern, somebody was going to publish pictures of his daughter and he didn't want it. And he talked to the guy on the phone and he goes, so-and-so, the guy's name, you live in Rye, New York. I will have 10,000 people on your front lawn if you publish those pictures.
I probably would have been one of them.
Oh, yeah.
I was a big Howard Stern fan. But, it's just a place where, it's interesting because I know your story, but, on the surface, kids are walking around with $20 bills in their hands and, everybody's just got everything that they want. But what you don't see is the hidden secret that like alcoholics are just running rampant everywhere and parents don't have time for their kids and things like that. So I had it made in one sense, but in another sense, I had some pretty crazy things happening to me, at the same time, and I don't know if you want to get into that now, but
of course, because the people who grow up in what you would be considered as affluent, and that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with a guy who grew up in one of the wealthier neighborhoods in LA, and they have their own. It's different. They have their own types of suffering, and you don't realize it. You see
it's behind the scenes.
You see, their parents have a lot of money, but like you said in the beginning, maybe their father, didn't come to their baseball games or football games, and that's something that they really wanted. It seems so. It's a different type of thing. It's being there. It's I'm at the point in my life where I'd rather have no money and see my kids than have all the money in the world and never be able to see them. So, and that's where drugs are rampant because you have the money for the drugs.
Yeah, I had access to anything I wanted, and also, things have changed a little bit. But back in those days, like at the age of 14, I could come home anytime I wanted. But to highlight something you just said about fathers, for me, and I'm not going to suck my thumb because I know your father's story, but my father's a great guy, but he was just never home. My dad was always traveling. It was very normal for me to, at a very young age, to not know where my dad was, because he was always traveling. And, I looked up to him. He's a very smart guy, spoke all these languages, good dresser, but he was never home, like for 6 weeks at a time, So as a kid, I just assumed that that's just the way it was, It wasn't until later in life that I realized that I learned how to play baseball and all these things from my friends' dads, Anyway, but I didn't know that stuff when I was a kid. But what's interesting about my story is that something happened when I was 11 years old that I actually didn't know happened until what I call the dark ages sunk in. I'm 53 years old, so the dark ages, sunk in around in my 30s, right? And I just, what you got to know about me, people that know me for a long time, I was a very, very confident, borderline cocky guy. I'm a very, very humbled guy now, but just know inside there's an asshole in this guy, and he doesn't come out anymore. But he used to be out all the time. I was always driven to be successful, more importantly, the best. So, I was on this fast track to become a chiropractor, and not only just a chiropractor, but I was going to work in the biggest office in Manhattan. And everybody that knew me probably hated the fact that they knew I was going to be extremely successful because I was confident. I had everything, all the tools, and I couldn't fail. I had all the tools that I wish my kids had to succeed. The only problem with being a guy like that is if all of a sudden you catch a fear where you don't feel confidence, it could be the most frightening event ever. I remember a mentor one time told me, be careful, you're going to hit a wall one day. And I said, not me, I'm not going to hit a wall. So it was in my early 30s, and I was at a chiropractic school, and I was on my way to this amazing opportunity job in Manhattan. I was working for one of the biggest doctors, probably going to take his practice over, and everybody, there it is. He's going to be successful. And I just remember I was on the train, and I was very overwhelmed by the fact that I had to be there at like 6:30 a.m., and I was going to work all day. It was a pretty intense job, but I can handle it, Just remember one day I was on the train, and all of a sudden I just got scared. That was the first thing that happened. I never felt that way before. I didn't believe in myself. I started to question whether or not I was doing the right thing.
Was it an event? Did something get
Well,
in your way?
I didn't know at the time. It just came out of nowhere. But I just remember I was on a train, and I got this. I didn't know what anxiety was or anything like that, because I was Superman, you know. But all of a sudden, I just felt this just frightening feeling of just not believing in myself, not being certain of what I wanted to do. And I just remember I was frightened to death to go into work that day. And that was not like me. I tried my best to kind of like pretend it wasn't happening, but I couldn't. And it was so bad that I had to call in and lie, make up a reason why I couldn't come into work, and I went home, which was a bad idea because then it really, really sunk in. And what's interesting about that moment is that started a 3-month process of me not being able to even leave my house.
So I say this with, there's the great trainer Teddy Atlas, who trained Mike Tyson. He said a comment to me that resonated with me. I heard this years ago, where he said, if you ask me what Mike Tyson's record is, it's probably 0-5. And the reason he said that, because Mike Tyson was so talented, so good, he didn't have to work that hard. Because it sounds like you have a natural ability for confidence, right?
Right.
So he didn't have to work that hard. And the minute he was met with an obstacle, he folded like a lawn chair. Now, I take this in when I coach my kids. I'll see a kid on the field, and he'll have all the talent in the world. And I said, that kid there who doesn't have to work to just be better than everybody, one of 3 things is going to happen to them. They're going to eventually be met with an obstacle, whatever that obstacle is, and they're either going to quit, they're going to cheat, or they're going to rise above it. The ones who rise above it athletically, they're the ones who make it to the next level. The ones that quit and cheat, they're pretty much done after high school. And I watch that because they're so good, they never have to work for anything. And eventually that obstacle is going to happen. And that sounds like what happened to you.
I know what you're saying, but I knew that. And I knew to tell myself that at the time, but this was different. Something else was going on, almost like I had some sort of a mental challenge or something like that. I couldn't figure it out. Because I knew that strong people push through it and stuff like that. But there was something else going on that was more powerful than me. And by the way, this is kind of a precursor of the whole concept of the dragons, because the way I explain that story is that I started to feel like dragons were swooping over my head, like waiting for me like vultures to become weak so that they could kill me. So that was the first concept of the dragon. So anyway, 3 months go by, and I'm progressively getting more, because I was buying into it. You said that before. I was buying into it further and further. And for somebody that's listening to this podcast, you might resonate with this idea of just like, at one moment, everything's fine. And then in the other moment, you can't explain what happened. And you start looking like, what was the event? What happened? What triggered this? I couldn't figure any of that out. All I could tell you is that the only thing that made sense to me was to kill myself.
Wow.
I was in a place where I was at the extreme opposite of cocky and confident, and I was completely unconfident, scared, and I could not for the life of me get out of that hole.
Was it the not the quintessential fall from grace? You were in such a level.
I mean, it got worse and worse as I became more of a sissy, and I got weaker and weaker and weaker. But I still could not tell you. I had the greatest job. I was going to get married. Everything was going perfect. So I didn't know. So by the grace of God, things fall in. I know that you recently lost a good friend, and we were talking about how, you either have help or you didn't. My mom was right by my side. My mom's a bit of a kook, but she did this right. And my mom talked me in, because all I wanted to do is check out. I just said that would be that was actually a desirable thing. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. I was so frightened and embarrassed of how I felt. So my mom takes me to see a therapist, which is the last thing I ever want to do. Because when you're a cocky and confident guy, even if you're in the darkness, you still think therapy is a bunch of shit, right? So, but I was like, I'll try anything. I was so frightened. So here's what's interesting about this therapist is I went to the therapist. I don't even remember her name, but I only saw her once. And this is after 3 months. I hadn't shaved. I'm not showering. I'm a mess. I'm engaged to be married. And I can't even face her. Don't see my friends. Everybody's like, what the hell happened to him? I had to quit my job, everything, which is piling it on, getting it worse and worse and worse. So I go to see this therapist and I sit down in front of her, and this is coming out in my new book. And, I'm sitting across from this person that I never wanted to see in my life. Somebody that's asking me, why do you want to kill yourself? I was embarrassed about that. So we get into this conversation. And what's fascinating about what I'm about to share is how I went from super confident and cocky to extreme darkness and wanting to die. And then I came back the same way. And I want people to understand that that's possible. That's possible. You shouldn't expect it. But it's possible that your brain could latch onto an idea that take you way down or right back up. It's possible. So this woman started asking me questions. She said, why do you want to kill yourself? And I said, I don't know. It's the only solution. And I was kind of avoiding that. So she started to peck at like, well, what happened? What day was it? So I'm counting 3 days ago, sometime in July. I was on my way to work and all that stuff. And she's like, all right. And she says, well, is there anything relevant about July? And I said, well, it's my birthday. And she goes, well, that's a good time. And I go, no, I don't like to talk about my birthday. I hate my birthday. I don't like when people give me gifts or anything. I'm like ducking my birthday. And I didn't really understand this until I woke up later. And she says, why? Why do you like? I said, I don't want to talk about my birthday. I don't like it. I like other people's birthdays, not mine. And then she's like, all right. So then she says to me, she goes, well, what about your parents? Because I met your mother. What about your dad? And I said to her, oh, my parents are divorced. That's a mess. I don't want to talk about that. And then she looks at me and she says, when did they get divorced? And I call this the snap. When she asked me that question, and this is what I want people to understand. This is why I've become an expert at asking questions. When she asked me that question, in that instant, I made the connection that when I was 11 years old, on my birthday, and it didn't come out until now, 11 years old on my birthday, I walked in on my birthday, and thinking 11-year-old, I think we were going to a bowling alley or something like that. And I walked in, and my mom was in her underwear at the base of the stairs. Didn't know this happened until this moment, crying. And I said, what's wrong? And I remember, I never forget, she looked at me and she's crying. She says, your father's leaving us. Now, I don't know what that means because my dad's always leaving us, but I knew that she was upset. And I just remember with my tongue licking the bottom of my lip because that's what I would do when I was nervous. And I said, all right. So I left, right? And I said, can I go play with my friends? And I had to go tell my friends my birthday got bumped. So something that I did that day tucked that under the carpet, and it didn't resurface until the day I was on that train, which was my birthday, going into the city at like 33 years old. And it knocked me on my ass. And it wasn't until I gained the clarity, or as I say, made sense. That's where the whole concept of my work came from, that I became free. And there's two things that happen when and I know you're very much like this. There's two things that happen when you go through something like that. One of them was that, because in an instant, I was perfect. I was back. I wanted to go to work, and I was like, boom. I was clear of it. I knew I probably needed to go see more therapists, but no, fuck it, I'm done. I'm back out on the field. And I made a decision that day that I'm never going to go feel like that again.
Well, so that's the funny thing. So once you experience an emotion,
right?
Once you experience it, and it sucks, like with his death. So I was where he was. You were where he was.
Right.
So you know what that feels like. But when Mike took his life, my peripheral vision, which was here during that time, and on a normal day it would be like here, widened up so much because I saw the carnage of my potentially selfish decision. Like you taking your life. It was ultimately a selfish decision.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about that. at
No,
all.
you're not.
Yeah.
And because there's ripple effects to that
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, think about what you would have done to your mother and your father, who I'm sure love you.
Not a thought.
Not a thought in your because it's like there's total darkness. You know, you see this with people who take their lives and they leave children behind. I mean, you're a father. Is there anything more pure that you love in the world than your children?
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, I mean that I have a reason to never kill myself now, but I made a decision that day that I would never go back to feeling that way. But I also made a decision and a commitment that day to spend the rest of my life helping people that don't know that that's possible. So all of my work that day became entrenched in human behavior and how to help people that can't be helped. Because you know what it's like when you feel like there's nothing anybody can do to help me. I am going to die. And that's it. And it's a good thing because it's going to end my suffering, right? That kind of person, if that person can learn how to put a pause on that and step into what I call a conscious space where they can look at things from different vantage points. That's the hardest part about it.
Well, that's how the whole Not Today movement got.
Exactly.
That's how I started.
And that's what I wrote on my cup. I wrote,
So the Not Today movement was born out of this, where
right.
you don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about 3 weeks from now.
Today.
Just not today. That's all you got to do. And that's that moment for you. It's like,
That's it.
I'm just not doing this today.
It's cognitive distancing.
So have you ever woken up in the middle of the night or early in the morning and you have all these things running through your head, and being a creative, I'm gonna foretell the future a little bit. You get an idea like at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Sure.
and you can't. I keep a notepad by my bed, but that's how I just get it out. But you know how many times I got to sit there and go, no, don't let this happen. Not today. Don't let this happen today.
You mean a negative idea?
Both negative, mostly negative. I'll do this with a negative. It's like, no, man, don't let this happen right now. This is not happening
Right.
today. We're not going down this road. And I've had to consciously say that to myself several times. And then once I'm able to decompress myself, but by example, and this is what I love about you, is because by example, you can say, I was in that place. I was there. I know exactly where you were. So I'm going to show you what I did. It may not work for you, but if this doesn't work for you, I'll show you different ways, other different things that I have resources now because I'm so engrossed in this lifestyle. So I love that because you were there and you're going to try your best to make sure other people aren't there. Are they going to be there? Are you going to be successful all the time? You're not.
No.
You're not. And if you know that going in there, then it doesn't take up too much space in your head.
So, because I remember you and I were talking about this, because I think I asked you one of the questions, like if somebody's listening to this podcast and, what would you recommend that they do? And they were in that jam up. We have to also recognize that somebody has to become open and to receiving help, because I remember what it was like to not being interested in help. So, when my mom said, let's go see the therapist, I had to say yes. Right. So I have to embrace that. But what I can do through my podcast and through my books and through the channels that I provide, like you do, where people can be listening and learning in private, maybe I can say something that has that part of the brain that goes, that's different. And if the human brain just captures a glimpse of a moment where it can see it from a different vantage point, because our vantage point and our perception is completely programmed, since childbirth. I remember your story. The way I look at the world is not my choice. I was programmed with what's called a perspective in life, and that creates my perception. So that's why I wear glasses without lenses, because I used to go through life looking at life through the lenses that were provided to me.
God,
right?
I can't wait for you to hear the opening of this. So I record the openings prior to you coming in, and I talk about the blurred lens of reality.
I'm leaving these with you.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I always do when I go visit someone. You're going to get these glasses.
And they will have a special place here because I want everybody to look through clear lenses just like you do.
Well, just think about the idea of wearing glasses. Somebody else made the lenses and it skews your vision. So when I got these glasses, I took the lens out, and what's funny is I can see better with them. But that's the concept: is human beings have this ability. Every one of us. Sometimes they don't get to it. They have this ability to gain a glimpse of clarity through a different vantage point, and that's why I wrote on my cup. Just like you say, not today. I teach people when they have a thought. 40 to 70,000 thoughts run through our brain a day. And for whatever reason, we like to latch on to like 2 or 3 and call that reality.
And 80% of them are negative.
In this world, sure.
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherrie Allsup is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherrie on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherrie has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherrie's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherrie will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction, tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherrie's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherrie also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherrie Allsup, go to sherrieallsup.com. That's SherrieAllsup.com.
I just teach people when either it's your thought or somebody says something to you or an event, is distance yourself, give yourself a little bit of space and just go,
You know the funny part about that 80%, that's a real statistic.
Yeah.
So 80% of our thoughts are negative. A child, 30 to 40% are negative. And then what happens? Just like you start to become ingrained and embedded
Sure.
and imprinted with the negativity here and there, and you suppress it. And see, for me, like my stuff started coming out in my early 40s. Right? You're fortunate that you're a little bit ahead of the curve with the early 30s.
yeah.
And when they started coming out, it's just like I didn't want to feel those things because they were not comfortable.
And you
at
had a
all.
kid. You already had a kid.
Yeah, they weren't comfortable feelings, and I didn't know how to get through them. So when you're speaking to people, have you ever become so frustrated? Because your goal is to try to help them in whatever form, fashion that person needs it. Did you ever become so frustrated because you couldn't?
I mean, one of the unconscious behaviors of a human is to be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's an archetype.
We love the idea of swooping in and saving the cat from the tree, but sometimes the cat doesn't want to come out of the tree. So I think it's just, I know what you're saying. It can be frustrating when you look at somebody and say, if they just did this, then everything would be great.
Just like,
especially if it's something as serious as losing your friend. You always go back and say, I wish that he would have called me, but he didn't. He knew he could have called you.
Yep.
So I've changed the way that I look at things, which has made it so the things that I look at have changed. So I don't get frustrated with people anymore because I understand. It makes sense why they're like that.
So with him, we were getting, me and my other group of friends, we were getting so frustrated with him, and we're men, and we deal with frustration like men do, which is usually to act out in anger. We actually had plans to go over there and maybe get a little physical with him and say, hey, you're going.
Yeah,
you're going.
sure.
But that was the level of frustration. Because the one person who was always sitting next to me, I couldn't, we're sitting across from all these people, gaining all this different perspective, and his ears were shut off.
Yeah. You wanted something different than he did, though. So, that's what's tough about being the hero is you see something you want to have happen, but it's not what they want to have happen. I mean, I spend my life having people tell me that they're stuck in life and going through trauma and all of this stuff, and I don't explain to them how to get out of the hole because when you're in a hole, all you have to do is look to your right and notice there's a fucking ladder there. But if you don't look to your right, you'll never notice that the ladder's there. So what I find that my place is in the very beginning is I have to give them the space to make the conscious decision that they want to change. The only way you can shift is by catching your drift first. You have to first understand, like I somehow did, that I had gotten off path. And from that space, I could say something like, I don't want to be like this anymore. That would be a prompt for me to go in a different direction. So when I speak to people and I'm asking them questions, and I don't see them initiating anything in the form of action in a direction, I just know it's not time yet. So I'm just there with them, and I just like to give them the opportunity to know that if they change their mind, here's what to do. But you can't stop a locomotive,
But what you did for yourself, going back to your own epiphany, you actually looked yourself in the mirror and told yourself a very hard truth, which is, I always say, the one person you should be truthful with, because we all look for truth from other people. Like, how many times have you heard, well, what do you want me to tell you? How about you tell me the truth? So we expect truth from everybody else. I was speaking about this on Instagram Live. We expect truth from everybody else, but the person we fail to give the truth to more times than not is ourselves.
Sure.
Why am I failing at life? Well, because you're acting inappropriately, because you're doing all these bad things, you're making bad decisions, you're drinking too much, you're doing all these bad things.
Making excuses.
That's the truth. Not until you can look at yourself in the mirror, and that person in the mirror knows your weaknesses, knows your strengths, knows your insecurities, knows your fears. They know everything about you. They have the tactical advantage over you. And that's the one person you cannot lie to. If you don't feel like getting up, well, maybe you're lazy. If you're not in shape, not in the shape that you want to be, well, maybe it's time to start eating better things, going to the gym, working out, doing all that stuff. That's the truth. But people want the easy way out. They want you to give them the secret sauce. And there is no secret sauce. The secret sauce is work harder.
Yeah, I mean, there's another place for it's like when somebody is telling me, when somebody's talking to me and alluding to the fact, like, well, what should I do? How do I do it? What I do is I just go, because if I give them the space to hear what they just said, they always figure out it's bullshit. So what I used to do is I would be like, hey, you're full of shit. You can't do that. You got to do this. And then all of a sudden, unconsciously, I just took over the direction of their life without them making the decision. And I gave them what they wanted. I started directing them. But what I do is I just allow people to think about what they said. So if somebody says something to me and my brain goes, this is nonsense. This person is just bullshitting. They're making up excuses and all that stuff. They need to look in the mirror, all that stuff. They need to see that. So I give them the opportunity. So I'll say like, and they'll go, people don't like that because they want an answer. They'll say, well, what does that mean? And I go, well, I was just thinking about what you said. And by saying that, they think about it too. And you know what happens if you shut your mouth as the hero? They go, yeah, it's pretty stupid what I just said, isn't it? And I go,
It's hard to say that as podcasters, to say the best thing you can do sometimes is to shut your mouth.
Yeah.
So, do you know Charlie Cifarelli?
Well, if somebody goes on your podcast, they're asking for help.
True. True. Do you know Charlie Cifarelli from Clubhouse? You've seen him on Clubhouse.
I think I know the name. Yeah.
All right. So Charlie told me years ago that he does not give people advice. He gives them suggestions. Okay. And I took that ball and ran with it, because if you give somebody advice, you own it. Just like you said, you took control. You took control of the course of their life. So with a suggestion, it's like, I suggest you do this. Now all of a sudden it because if they're wrong, if your advice you give them is wrong, guess what? You own it. You own it. And that's a bad place to sit in, because if you're dead wrong, you're 100% wrong, well, JC told me to do it, so I guess I got to do it. And that's not it's not a fun place, and you shouldn't do that with anybody. In my opinion, my suggestion is don't do that stuff. But so let's backtrack for a second. Yeah. So you have this epiphany. You're able to do some work.
Right.
You're able to start providing. Did you ever marry the girl?
Oh yeah.
You married the girl, so she was willing to wait for you and.
Oh man, yeah, all that stuff. Like you. I remember you telling me like I don't know how your wife put up with all that stuff you did. So
she's the hero of the story.
Ironically, I ended up getting divorced from that woman who's my best friend for life, and we've got 2 great boys together.
That's weird.
Oh, listen, I could have a podcast on how to have a successful divorce. I mean,
That's your book. There's your next book. You'll got to be number one bestseller.
A lot of books in this head. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how these angels are right in front of you sometimes, and you just don't know.
But there was a slow progression to where you are now, helping people,
right.
reaching out. To you had to work. You had a family.
Yeah, I went back to work. Yep.
You went back to work, and then the Work-a-Holic JC comes in.
Right. That's what's interesting about that is, it's a double-edged sword when you become free and you make this decision. Part of me was running away from this darkness I never wanted to see again. And the way I mended that was I decided to help people for the rest of my life, which means I didn't help myself. So, they're all necessary parts of getting to where I'm at right now. But what ended up happening is I went and became a workaholic. I became a humanitarian. I was a humanitarian of the year. I found out that there was earthquakes in Haiti. I went there to save everybody. I just started doing all of this stuff, and I completely forgot about my kids. I mean, I love my kids. I used to tell my kids in the morning, you're the greatest thing in the world. Daddy loves you more than ever. And then I would come home after they were asleep, so
You became your father.
well, that's the worst thing in the world, right? Is that, but at the same time, I had to learn those lessons. If you ask my kids and my wife and my new daughter, what it's like to have me as a dad now, I'm the greatest dad in the world. And there's only one reason I'm like this is because of all this suffering. So, my relationship with suffering, and my next book is called The Suck. I love it. I love it. If I wake up and there's nothing wrong, I find something wrong because I love to bask in the area where growth takes place.
Well, that's the C.S. Lewis quote. And, everybody quotes C.S. Lewis. So it's, if suffering is such a good thing, ought it not to be sought out? Yeah. Because there's no pressure with it. There's no diamonds without pressure. There is, and I've said this, I say this to so many people. I have never met one interesting person in my life that doesn't have some junk in the past.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist. And, how you grew up, you could say, oh, your life was all rosy. No, there's stuff. There's stuff. It's just you're better at hiding it. That everybody has their own stuff.
Right.
Some are just better at hiding it. So that's the good stuff, and that's what's going to teach you the lesson. I learned more from my losses, and I lost a lot in my life than I have from my victories. I'll watch kids on the field, and the most purest form of any type of help is coaching.
Yeah.
So you'll watch kids lose, and I'll sit there and I'll watch kids when they lose, and I want to see how they react, because winning's easy. When you're on top of the world,
I love watching people lose and see how they react.
Yeah, when you're on top of the world, winning's easy.
You don't learn anything from winning.
Nothing. You learn, you want to be a good winner. Okay, so you don't want to rub it in people's faces. But when people lose, and I watch some kids lose their mind, those are the kids I'll go to. I go, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're telling me you didn't leave it out on the field. You're telling me that you got something left that you didn't show. That's what you're telling me. So next, you got to go do it. So that's the lesson.
And you can imagine what I say when my kids lose and complain. I just say, I mean, my whole family just knows that if they come to me, I always say, save the drama for your mama. When my kids come to me, it's okay to be upset, but I never jump in and try to fix that problem. I just allow them to self-reflect, and they always fix it.
I struggled with this with my kids because I had a very oppressive father who, if I struck out in baseball, I'd get yelled at, stuff like that. Right. So when I
wish I had a dad like that.
No, trust me, you do not.
No, I mean, that was there at my games.
With my kids, when they have a bad game,
right.
Here's what I'll do. I'll say, okay, tell me what you did well.
Good question.
Tell me what you did well in the game.
Yeah.
Well, and they'll say this, so it's not a constant, well, you shoulda. And I say, okay, very calmly, I'll say, what did you do wrong? And they'll tell me, and I say, okay, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Learn from that defeat, because this feeling doesn't feel good. Just like when you were in your dark place, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Let me see it. Let me find out a way to change it.
I mean, you could also, what my daughter's competing on an international level of jiu-jitsu right now, which means, she just fought in Florida against this girl from Brazil who just beat the shit out of her. And my daughter works.
They live, sleep, and eat.
Well, but my daughter wants to kill this girl next time. But my point is, she was very upset. She was crying and everything like that. So I had that conversation with her after, because she's just traumatized by it. And the question I always say is, I go, what could you do better?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I try to stay away from what did you do wrong, because then I'm teaching them that there is such a thing as wrong. Right. I like to look at in a solution focused way, what could we do better? How could we make it right? And the reason why I think I do that is because that's the way I was raised. I remember how many times I heard no, and, don't do this, and that's wrong, and everything like that. So, I want my kids to grow up in a world where they're not afraid of making mistakes and wrong.
Maybe it's time for me to remove the word wrong, because I think you're absolutely correct on that one.
Think about it. It's interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, there you go.
You like that little callback?
I love it.
But it might be a word that I need to remove from my vocabulary, because
maybe
I didn't know. I really don't know I didn't know another way in order to express that. The things that they didn't like, the things that didn't work.
So much better than your dad, though.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're the evolution, and what maybe it's not your job to get it right. Maybe your son will progress because of the good work that you've done and do it even better. And that's another interesting thing about being a man, is sometimes we feel like we have to be the best man. Like, I'm at a place in my life right now where I'm okay with the fact that my kids will do better at this than me.
So you move all over the place.
Yeah.
You do your own stuff, and you're out there. Now, your father did the same thing. That's why I say, you got to be careful that we don't want to become our parents. The bad things, anyway.
Sure,
we want the good things. But in order for you to be J.C. Doornick the Dragon, you have to get your name out there. You're going to, you obviously went to Chicago, and you were away from your family. How do you balance that with your newfound life? I want to be there with because I struggle with this too. Like, I'm traveling here. There's a part of me that I want to do things that make my kids proud.
Yeah.
All right.
Point.
I want to make my kids proud. I want to say, my dad had a lot of faults, but at least he was a good dad.
That's my definition of success, is my kids saying, that's my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So I juggle with that. Sure. And that's why I try not to go away for too long, because I miss them. I miss them terribly. I miss them as soon as I'm out the door. But I also want to make them proud. Say, hey, listen, my dad did that. My dad did that.
I'm in an interesting place in my life where I've structured my life to be a home-based. I used to travel 4 times a month, and I don't do that. And the interesting thing is that if I'm telling the truth, I used to like going away. Right. I didn't like seeing my kids, but I used to like going away. I don't know why. I just maybe felt important or something like that. I don't like going away from my family anymore. So that's important. It's like, you could try to fix this stuff, but I don't want to be away from my wife. I don't want to be away from my daughter. My kids are in college now. So the first thing I could tell you is, anytime I travel, I bring them with me if I can. And if not, it's a nightmare for me. I do not like sleeping in a bed somewhere without my wife. So for the person that's listening to this and say, how do I balance this all out? I'm just going to ask you to check yourself and just check and see if you like going away.
It's the wonderful life scenario for me.
Yeah.
I see what my life is like without them. And every single time.
Your kids are older, though.
11 and 14.
Oh, okay. So you're right in it.
So I see what my life would be like if I was alone. So when I'm sitting in a hotel room, you want to talk about a workaholic? I don't stop. Like, I really don't stop, because I got a void that I need to fill. I don't like it. Unfortunately, there are some necessities that I need to travel for. And they understand that. My wife understands that. But we just, so one of the things we just did, we were up in Cops and Campers in Ithaca, New York for an event. And the organizer, Eric Reynolds, was so gracious. He says, bring your family. And I was able to bring my kids with me. I didn't like speaking in front of my wife. That I didn't like. It made me very uncomfortable.
Interesting.
Because some of it has to do with her, and it dredges up a lot of feelings with her. But I got to watch my kids hang out with each other and go fishing, and we ran in the morning, and it was nice. It was a different experience. And years ago when I was traveling, before I was a cop, I was traveling coast to coast. I was single. I was unattached. I used to see one of my bosses, and he would pay for a plane ticket for his wife, and he's like, "We make it a mini vacation," when I travel. And that's the point where I want to get to, and that's where I'm working towards. That's my goal, is to make that happen.
I mean, I don't want to get into some deep stuff with you right now, but we're all the dominant forces of our lives. If you want something, you just have to change the structure, and it's risky. But we're going to die one day. You and I have had a brush with it. So I'm just in a place right now where I put my desire to be with my family before my desire to be successful. Because what I've noticed now is that what gets my kids to say that's my dad is not my money and not my success and my accolades. It's that I'm there and I'm present. You know what I mean? So I've just flipped a switch, and I just became that guy where I put the things that matter most first. Now, you got to make money. So what I started to do is I started to structure a home-based business model for myself. But I made the decision to first be present. Now, that's scary when you're the provider.
Well, you have to figure out how to get from here to there. Like, here's where you want to be.
Yeah.
All right.
I just said, fuck it.
Well,
no, I know it's scary, but I just want you to know that's how I did it, because it was that important to me. And my wife, if she was sitting here right now, she would tell you that I drop everything for my family, right? But at the same time, I've structured myself to make passive income now, and I worked my ass off to get to that place. I mean, my wife and I were about to launch relationship retreats. Now, that's going to be a great business model and everything, but it's going to be time for my wife and I to be together.
That's a good model, because you worked your wife into it.
Yeah.
Now I want to switch gears a little bit.
All right.
Because first time I meet you, I'm in the lobby of, I forget what the name of the theater was in Chicago, and you come up to me.
Yeah.
So I'm JC Doornick. People call me the Dragon.
The Dragon.
And I get sort of taken back. I'm like, well, you can call me Nighthawk.
That's right, like the Step Brothers.
Step Brothers. You can call me Nighthawk.
When I saw the Step Brothers, I was cracking up. Yeah.
So it kind of caught me off guard.
Right.
I want to get into that. I know the genesis of the dragon. The dragons are circling you, and that you're becoming easy prey for them. How did you transform into this dragon?
So, did you ever see the movie Avatar?
Sure.
Okay, so you know how the part of that one scene where they have to get on those pterodactyl things and bond with them? So keep that in mind. So I went from this phase of my life where the things that I was afraid of, I equated as dragons, like I said before. So the natural step, the action step that I took was what I thought I needed to do, and that was to become a dragon slayer. So there's a lot of dragon slayers out there, these people that are fighting through things, and Tony Robbins and, breaking through and all that stuff. And what's interesting about dragons is dragons are mythical creatures. They've never actually existed, fire-breathing dragons. But if you look at the history of them, they've been spoken about in many, many cultures, but nobody's ever actually seen one. So part of it was that I looked at this dragon as something that who I am now is somebody that I never thought I could be, a mythical creature. So that's part of it. But the biggest part of it is that if you want to get rid of the monster in the closet or the scary clown under the bed, you have to go hang out with it. And if you really, really want to realize what your superpower is, we talk all about embracing the suck and getting uncomfortable and all that stuff. You have to bond with your fear. So when I wake up every morning as the dragon, that is my way of saying that the things in life that scare me the most, I welcome to the point where I am them. I've embodied them. And what's interesting, when you do that, you start to realize that those dragons were not swooping over my head waiting to kill me. They were trying to get me to realize that they were there to help me. And I never knew it, because if you change the way you look at things you look at change. And that's what I do.
Well, okay. I'm gonna give you a prime example to prove you don't need proof of concept. You have enough proof of concept.
I'll take the validation.
The guy who shot at me, Anthony Vocatore.
Yep.
He held so much power over me because I felt like he ruined my life.
Perfect example.
Felt like he ruined my life, and if I ever saw him, I'd beat him bloody.
Yep.
Now, one day, and I don't know why this happened. I cannot put my finger on it. I started just thinking, and I said, God, what did this guy have to do to shoot at police officers twice? Right. What kind of pain was he feeling? And I started to empathize, and I started to feel sorry for him and give him even a little bit of pity.
Yeah.
And what happened was all that power that he had over me, it disappeared overnight, like in an instant. And what did I do? I was in a dark place. He was in a dark place. Now we have some sort of common ground. And and I say it a lot, if I'm sitting across from him, people think, oh, you probably killed him. No, I'd probably shake his hand because once I did that, it put me right where I was supposed to be.
It's your power.
I like my life now. I like doing this show. I like speaking to different people.
You wouldn't be doing this if not for him.
Never.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting about that is that doesn't mean that you have to say what he did was okay. What I'm talking about is the more you run from things, the bigger and badder they get. But if you confront things, that's one step. But if you bond with them, the things that scare me the most. So when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm scared, or I get an anxiety attack and I'm walking out on stage in front of 15,000 people and I think I'm going to die or anything like that, I get excited. I get excited now because I've shifted the way that I look at things, and that's the work that I do. I mean, what I do for a living right now, through my books and my private community and coaching and things like that, I just have a goof-proof system that I teach people that helps them learn how to change the way that they look at things. That's all people need to learn how to do. It takes time, but if you can change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And I think that's the most powerful thing that a human being can learn how to do.
So go back and look at the 11-year-old J.C. Doornick. And that moment when your mother's sitting on the stairs in her underwear, crying her eyes out.
Licking my lips.
Licking your lips. That moment, which traditionally probably not a happy moment in your life, but once you realize that moment and now where you are now, look at how great that moment turned out for you.
It's the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Crazy to say that stuff.
But I still don't like my birthday.
Me neither.
My wife will tell you it's a nightmare to throw a birthday party for me, but I'm working on it.
By the time this airs, I will have turned 50. I'm not looking forward.
I just turned 53. I got you.
I am not looking forward to that birthday.
That's a good one.
And but somebody just asked me if I dye my hair, and I do not dye my hair, so I'm happy. I'm happy with that.
Good hair.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
So, those little things that you see as a detriment, once you turn them on their ear to piggyback on what you're saying, they become your strength, they become your power. And your suffering then stops being something that you're embarrassed about, and now you lead with it. For years, I never told anybody when I retired because I was too young to retire as a cop. Never told anybody I was a cop because I was embarrassed for that. Secondary question was, wow, you're really young. What'd you do, get on when you're 12? No, I actually tried to kill myself, and, I had to retire. I didn't want that. Now I say, well, I was in an officer-involved shooting.
Right.
And it disarms everything.
Right.
So that's a proof of concept. So everything you're talking about resonates. Even running towards that suffering stuff. I use the terminology running towards a prairie fire, because once you get through it, before it gets too big and it consumes you, you'll be on the other side. You'll be hurt, you'll be damaged, but you're going to be alive. And as long as you're alive,
You just use the word resonate, and that is a very, very close friend to the concept of making sense of things. If your listeners are listening to a conversation like this and all of your episodes, and they go, yeah, I understand that, and they gain this moment of clarity, that's a powerful move right there. But I warn them, I like to warn people that, you're only operating on 5% conscious brain a day. You're going to lose that moment. So the only thing I would challenge and encourage people to do is when you have moments of clarity and you make sense of things, and things resonate with you, go down that hole. Go further down that. Because if you don't, you're going to get swept right back up into the riptides of life. For the most part, I always say it's true. Life does suck and then you die. So what I encourage people to do is to learn how to operate successfully in the land of suck.
100%. I just had somebody reach out to me on social media, and I want to point this out to you. Her name's Nancy Warnock, and she had a lung transplant. She's just somebody who listens to the show, and she wrote me a little message today. She said, she just started seeing a therapist, and she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and she had that moment, right, where she felt that anxiety about going in for the transplant. But she's such a strong person, and she's such a better person for coming out on the other side of this transplant. And I wrote her back and I said, suffering has side effects and they stay with you. But you need to feel this stuff. Just like I need to feel the loss of my friend. I need to feel this stuff because it's an uncomfortable feeling. Right. And that way you learn from it. Because once you experience things multiple times, it becomes easier to deal with those situations as they keep coming up. It's practice. Yeah. That's all it is. So I've been on Make Sense with with JC. Where can we find that? Let's start with the podcast first.
Yeah, so it's called, you can't miss it. If you look it up, it's called Make Sense with Dr. JC. You'll see the Make Sense glasses. You'll see a yellow background. That's it. And that's all you got to do to find that.
And you're intimately involved in the 2025 Creative Con.
Yeah. I like anything that has to do with the creative process. And what I like about that event is, unlike other events, it's an event where people that are newer to the game can learn how to take their message from their brain and get it out to people. And it's just a great concept, as you know, by our friend Julie Logan.
So I was there in 2024 in February, and I said this before we started airing. Out of everything that I've done, that event
has been fruitful.
It's been one of the most fruitful events I've ever gone to. You, Sonia Chan, Julie, Brian Swift, the Admiral, Gary Hall. Gary Hall. I mean, I've met so many different people there, Chris Cushing, that I've just connected with. And these are people from completely different walks of life than I'm used to.
Well, imagine if you and I really got to know each other well, how many people we would meet through each other.
Of course, but that's what you do. When you connect with one person, all of a sudden it radiates out, that ripple effect. So that 2024, and I'm not trying to make an ad for it or anything, but I highly recommend it to anybody who has a spark of creativity. Yeah. Because you will meet some people there that just...
And you also learn how to get your message out. Podcasting, writing books, public speaking, producing,
And then the book that was launched, which I got a chapter in.
So, the
Creative
co-author book. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. That was an interesting experience, and I encourage everybody to do that.
You actually published 2 books that week.
I did. That was a big week. That was a big week. But I love that event. And what else you got coming up?
So I've got a book coming out called Make Sense, discovering the secret of discovering the secret of why shit happens. So that's coming out, hopefully getting picked up by Hay House. That's why I'm in a holding pattern right there. Not what you know, who you know, right?
Of course.
But my new passion is this. I mean, I own some network marketing companies, and I do a lot of transformation, and I do a lot of nutrition and health and stuff. That's where I've made my money, my passive income. But my new passion right now is this thing that I call Make Sense Academy. I'm somebody that probably spent a couple $100,000 on personal growth, and I see the high value in it, but a lot of people can't do that. And there's so many different places where all of the elements of things that you need to learn and the support you need and mentorship. So I had this idea of using the school platform, which is very popular right now, and creating a private community where people get live masterminds every day, coaching, mentoring, and access to any online course, business tool, lesson, and my system that I call the interface response system. All of that in one roof, plus anything that I create for the rest of my life for $24 a month. Now, that it sounds crazy to do that, but we beta tested it, and the people that are in it absolutely love it. They don't understand how I can facilitate it and fund it, but now it's growing. So I like the idea of group coaching, because one of the things that I learned is I can't help everybody. I can guide them, but when they collaborate with everybody else in the group, that's where the big lessons are. So that's called the Make Sense Academy. If people follow me on Instagram at Dr. JC Doornick, follow my podcast, you'll know everything about it.
And there's one episode you did on your podcast that is particularly interesting. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mine. Don't
PTSD.
worry. It's mine.
I got some interest. I just interviewed the wife of Jordan Belfort. I'm sure you heard about her.
Sure.
Wolf of Wall Street. And
she's been in this studio.
Oh, she has. You met Nadine.
I haven't.
Oh.
One of the other people who recorded in the studio.
You got to have her on the show. She'd be great. But yeah, I like to take interesting, just like your episode. I like to take concepts that make people go, like PTSD and police officer stuff. That was a great episode. But I like to help people make sense of them, So I like to ask questions and let people share their stories and have my listeners go, yeah, I get it, and then become empowered.
I think you owe CNC Music Factory some royalties for things that make you go, Yeah. I think it was CNC Music Factory.
That's a popular podcast name.
All right, so we can go to Dr. JC Doornick on Instagram. You have a website?
Yeah, so website is still riseupwithdragon.com, or you can go to makesensepodcast.com. They both go to the same place. But listen, you want to talk to me, I'm easy to find. I'm everywhere. I've got so many different things going on. But I guess what I would say is I'm interested in helping people that are looking for help, but also ready. That's an important thing. My conversation is going to be best served with somebody that kind of woke up with that fierce urgency of now, and they're ready for change. If they're not, they can listen to my podcast and they can get to that point. But I can't help somebody that's not ready to be helped.
So, JC, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and I end each show every week the same way. You've gone through some suffering in order to make your transformation, in order to get where you are today. And if it hasn't taught you something, boy, what a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
So I want to know from you, what has your suffering taught you?
Just to embrace it. Like some people, the Stoics say, the obstacle is the way. Suffering, suffering's an interesting word, because suffering is a word that indicates that challenges are tough. So I would maybe use a universal way of I like to call it the suck, but the number one main ingredient that is required for you to get everything that you currently want, the number one main ingredient is adversity. So, the next time suffering rears up, maybe just take a little bit of a pause and find the lesson, find the value in it, and listen to both Kevin's story and my story. We've both shared stories that say that the craziest, worst thing that ever happened to us is the greatest thing ever. So why wouldn't it be the same for you? And if you can learn, Brandi Carlile has a great song called The Eye. It says you can dance in a hurricane, but only when you're standing in the eye. At any time during your life when you're in a hurricane, there's always the eye. And that's it. That's it. Anything's possible when you become a possibility thinker.
I like that a lot, and I can't thank you enough for coming in here. It's been a really great conversation.
Yeah, it's always fun.
I think I learned more here than I have in 195 episodes. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. It's great.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Transformations with JC Doornick, a.k.a. The Dragon, and let's think about all the stuff that we learned. There's a cost to success. Light and dark are definitely decisions. Give people some space when they need it. Save the drama for your mama, but most importantly, embrace what scares you and embrace your suffering. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson, and of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.